they have proven that you can have a successful implementation of those projects. You can also have absolute failures of implementation of those projects. And it's not the application. It's the one that's walking around on two legs that's actually involved in doing the implementation. If you don't do it right, it's going to fail.
Welcome to Project Synapse for another week. I want to get back to this part of the topic we were talking about last week, and it had to do with consciousness and the limits of AI. And that was a big undercurrent story that happened this week in the midst of all the rest of it, which we ended up with a pile of other things, more security issues, just way beyond the pale. I actually went back to Grok myself and started to look at it as well. I think that was something. GPT-5, certainly the ennui of GPT-5 was like, there's that song from this, is it the 60s? Is that all there is? Is that all there is? And a lot of people were really, really starting to look at AI and go, wait a minute, what happened? And part of it, I think we talked about last Friday morning when we recorded, but it was that MIT report. And that was the big slam news from the week, which was MIT report, for those who hadn't read it, came out and said that 95% of AI projects are not getting any financial benefit. I don't trust that number, first of all. I find it hard to believe, but they did the report, they did the survey, and 5% of companies were getting a financial benefit. And that tanked the stock market the next morning. And it was,
this is why the stock market is a bad thing. It reacts emotionally. People react emotionally with it. Actually, and they react on headlines. They don't even bother to dig into the story.
Well, you're exactly right on those ideas, that they react on headlines, because this report had been out for 2 weeks? 3 weeks? I have no idea how long it had been out. It had been out for a while. Somebody wrote a story on it, and I'm guessing it wasn't the story that I wrote on it that tanked the stock market. I'd love it if it was.
I think one of the things people have to realize is, it's not like you flip a switch and poof, all of a sudden AI is saving you millions of dollars. People are still in the learning stage. They're still trying to figure out how to best use AI, what they can use it for, and so on. Even once they get to that point, even once we set up AI, they have to figure out how to tweak it and how to make it work best for them, and then figure out how are they actually saving money from it.
Good grief, John, were you at my breakfast table listening to me talking? Because you basically just stole my whole thunder here, dude.
Oh, did I?
That bug he placed.
Yeah, I should have known a security guy would be bugging my place. Good grief.
Don't have to bug it. He just reads your conversations online.
Because
you're using Grok.
John, listen closely. You're 100% right on this.
Okay, Jim.
Program's over. John will just do the closing credits now. We've
for joining us.
We've hit the singularity. Singularity was that. No, you thought the singularity was when AI became super intelligent. The singularity happens when Gagne turns to John and says, "You're absolutely right."
I want you to do me a favor. If you remember a month or so ago, you created AI John. And one of the sentences you said was me telling you that you're always right.
That's right. I remember that.
I want you to create AI Marcel that says, John, you are absolutely right. And then send it to me.
All right.
He thinks that's the last time he's going to hear this. Anyway, back to topic. And our topic being that, John, I'll just let you resurface and replay what you were saying that was so right.
Oh, I think it's going to take businesses time to realize savings and added income and so forth out of the use of AI. I think we're still in a learning stage, a figuring it out stage. And so for reporters to come out and go, oh, geez, only 5% of AI projects are actually making or saving money, it's too early to tell. To me, we're in the early stages. If you're not expecting probably a large percentage of AI projects that you're trying out to fail, then you've got to readjust your expectations.
But two things. One is, I don't know if anybody in our audience is old enough to remember the chaos report of the 1980s. 85% of IT projects fail to achieve their benefits, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And that went on for 30 years and has continually been there. Why? It's the old newspaper thing. If it bleeds, it leads. And they put these headlines up there. How do I know that? We wrote a whole book on IT projects and how you fix them. And, that was called the information paradox at the time. How can you have this much computation and this little benefit? This is not new. This is an old headline. Two things happened, though. One was the stock market is friggin' overvalued. We are in a new bubble, and even the guys like Sam Altman are trying to say, cool your jets a little, because they're afraid of a bubble bursting, and it can and probably should. I mean, I don't know. What's the company? Palantir.
Yeah,
Palantir
3
is the one
years
that took
ago.
the biggest hit this week.
And now its shares became the 19th biggest company on the market, on the S&P in 3 years. Yeah, but and nothing wrong with that. Peter Thiel's built companies before, not at this level, but Palantir, their PE ratio is in the hundreds to one. And for those who don't know investments, there was a time when if you looked at something that said 14, 15 to 1, you're getting a little up there, buddy. And we're now in the hundreds to one on these valuations. This is lost in space. Warning, warning, danger, Will Robinson. And I'm surprised that the market only took that like a 2% hit on that. So
I have one of those robots downstairs. It's about yay.
Danger.
Yeah, it does the warning, the whole bit. Yeah.
Oh,
wow.
Seriously.
There you go. So once again, we've gone off on a thread, but the idea that the market is overvalued is still there, and it's overvalued big time. And that's my investment advice for people is, the bulls make money in a bull market, bears make money in a bear market, and pigs never make money. Don't get into the last part of a market going, I got to get me some of that. And that's a big...
If I can reduce this to something really simple and non-technical, what John was saying, and I just want to ride on this, is people are building a new kind of infrastructure in business at the moment. So this is something entirely new, and we need to keep that in mind. At most, companies have been rolling this stuff out for about a year and a half at this point. And they're effectively rebuilding, like I said, an infrastructure, rebuilding software, rebuilding processes, all of these sorts of things, right? To put it as simply as possible, it's like, you walk out into an empty field with a handful of apple seeds, you throw them out and you come back a year later and you're upset because there isn't an orchard producing apples out there. It takes a while when you're building infrastructure to see the results of that kind of a massive project. And yeah, we're still trying to figure this out. We know that we have superhuman tools on our hands and superhuman intelligence at our disposal, but that doesn't mean we actually know how to use it. The intelligence, the artificial intelligence is superhuman. We're still trying to take these superpowers and go, okay, so how do we use this technology on a day-to-day basis? And yeah, we're still figuring it out.
Well, and let's not forget that an AI implementation is, I'll call it IT adjacent, because it's not just an IT project, but it's got IT involvement. And this won't be the first IT project, believe it or not, that goes over budget and under delivers.
You were big time right again. This is your day, man. You're just knocking them out of the park. You're the Toronto Blue Jays of journalism right now. The idea that this is IT adjacent is exactly it. And when we go back to the information paradox that John Thorpe really led, and Thorpe is one of those guys, if you haven't met him, look around if you ever get a chance to hear him. He's getting a little long in the tooth right now. But John was one of the guys who could synthesize an idea. He came out of the old IBM type of thing and DMR type of crew, and he could synthesize an idea. And John Thorpe told me one time, he said, problem with getting benefits from IT is that IT doesn't generate any benefits. IT gives you a capability that the business can transform into a benefit. How well they do at that is whether or not you get the benefits from IT. Hence his title, The Information Paradox. Still a valid book after all this. And the MIT report, if you just download it and you take a look at it, or you even just read a little deeper, you'll find out that they actually said 5% of AI projects are getting financial benefits. The rest are not. But the fact that the 5% exist proves that it's possible.
Yep.
And the problem is people are pursuing the wrong things. They all came in and said, I'm going to make a lot more money enabling my salespeople. They focused on the CRM part of it. I had a friend who developed something for CRM, and it was going to show how you could close an account and which ones were valuable and which ones weren't, which really works if you have 1 million accounts and you just can't keep track of anything and you want some numbers on a whole pile of retail type accounts. If you're in corporate sales and you have 100 customers and you don't know which one's going to close, you're not a salesperson. Like your AI prediction should not be better than your salesperson at that point. And these people are working on accounts. You're selling those companies $30,000, $60,000, $100,000. And if you're selling at that sort of level and it takes you 6 months to close something, most deals take 6 months to a year. You meet the person, you bring the idea to them, they budget for it, it goes into the budget, it gets approved, maybe they get to do a pilot at that point, and by the time you're in contract negotiations is next year. The point of this is they're automating something that is totally useless. It's the old country and western song. Tell me something I don't know. And so they put all this money into that. Good idea. Far too fast, they tried to replace customer service with what? All they were doing was replacing inferior tools.
The people on the support desk here?
No, I'm not talking about the people. Most of what gets replaced is, it's not that when we came in, we brought AI into customer support, that we already didn't have lousy phone trees, email, self-service. So you're not going to win a pile of money from that. You might, if it's working well, you might improve your customer satisfaction, which again, was going to take a while to make any money, and it's hard to track.
Well, and it's really hard to put a return on investment when what you're measuring is customer satisfaction. Like let's pretend for a second that your customer base who are going to be with you for the next, let's say 10, 20 years, because these are long-term support contracts, are suddenly much happier with the results that they're getting in terms of support. There is no additional money pouring into the company because now your customers are happier, or at least not initially, not right off the bat. That might happen. I mean, we're talking about long-term investments and expecting a return overnight, which is frankly kind of crazy. And of course, we are driven by this idea that there has to be a bubble and the bubble has to burst at some point. And I'm not even saying that it's not going to, because as you said, Jim, the market is extremely overvalued, but the market doesn't reflect reality anyway. It hasn't for years. If it ever did.
But the market for ideas always is overvalued. The stock market does this. Why should the stock market be any different than technology adoption? So two things. One is people could be smart enough to have a John Pinard sitting there and who's saying, hey, this is IT adjacent. I've given you the capability to improve your customer service. Go forth and do that. Right?
Well, and I mean, there's a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. Marcel, you talked about customer satisfaction and that doesn't bring in more money, but there's other ways to measure it. You know, you can do satisfaction surveys with your customers, but it's also, if you can improve customer satisfaction, there's this thing called customer retention that will, in the long term, bring you more money. Because if somebody's not happy with the post-sales support that they get, they're going elsewhere. But if you can make sure that you retain that customer, you will retain the money coming from them. The other thing I wanted to say, if I may, Jim, is this failure in implementations. I'm going to compare it to SAP and Salesforce, because they're kind of the two big ones. They have proven that you can have a successful implementation of those projects. You can also have absolute failures of implementation of those projects. And it's not the application. It's the one that's walking around most cases on two legs that's actually involved in doing the implementation, that if you don't do it right, it's going to fail. And one of the things that I have found with AI implementations is they're not putting enough resources towards it. You can't do it that way. It's no different than writing a custom program or doing an implementation. People need to develop requirements. What are your requirements for the end result of what you want to build out of AI, right? If you're doing agentic AI and building an agent, what do you want it to look like at the end? Because if you don't do that, how are you going to be able to test it to figure out whether it actually works and whether it delivers what you want it?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim.
I'll go back to your IT adjacent. If you're doing strategic planning properly, you know what capabilities you need to build and you have faith in them. And if you haven't done that, don't come and blame your IT department. I don't want to get down to this idea because I think IT came with a phony idea, which is we're going to get you to sign off all these specs and you don't even know what you want or what we're building. And no wonder projects failed. 2 years before you're supposed to deliver it, a user is supposed to brilliantly tell you everything they need down to the field on the screen, sign it off, freeze it, and we'll build it. This was never going to work. But now we've gone just the total opposite, which is just, I need some technology. Give me some. And then and what am I going to do with it? And we haven't even answered the question, what are you trying to do?
Exactly.
What is it about? What's the secret of your business? And a lot of people, and I fault the MIT report for this, if they haven't gone through this, I think they indicated that people weren't changing processes. They weren't doing the things that they needed to do to get these benefits in the first place. So first of all, they're looking in the wrong place. And they may very well be horrendously successful there, but they can't prove it. Second of all, they're not affecting the processes in a business. And to somebody who wants to do that, here's an unfortunate problem you have. Technology now moves at this speed. People and behaviors, we didn't reprogram people. And so culture, people, and behaviors move at the rate they move. You can help them along, but you're not going to change that speed easily, especially in an established company. In a startup, 2 people and a bag of chips and some pizzas at 8 o'clock at night, you can break all kinds of rules. But a big company, culture, process, hard to change.
And for regulatory kinds of things that...
Let's go back to the dot-com era just for a moment here, because we're waiting for the bubble to burst in exactly the same way we were waiting for the bubble to burst in the dot-com era. And believe it or not, there are actually differences. There were businesses that were built entirely on fantasies in the dot-com era. We are all old enough to remember that people were throwing money at companies that just stuck .com at the end of a name. And they were throwing money at it with the idea that this is what was going to drive massive amounts of investment. Obviously, that was going to fall apart at some point. But I want to point out that the dot-com bubble was built on the internet. And I don't know about you, but you may have noticed that the internet has not gone anywhere. The internet is pervasive. It is part of absolutely every business, every life, every home, every service that's out there. The internet is real, despite the fact that there were people who were banking on the idea that you could just stick .com at the end of something and rake in entire things. The tech on the AI bubble, which I'd like to think of as a thicker bubble in the sense that it's going to be a little harder to pop, is that, yes, there is hype. There is a gold rush mentality that's out there. But unlike the .com bubble, which was built entirely on fantasy, this is actually built on real tech. There are a lot of what I'll call them tourists who are showing up in the marketplace, and they're basically saying, I can put in the minimum of effort necessary and people are going to flock to me. I'm going to make lots of money and maybe I can cash out before anybody notices that I really don't have a whole heck of a lot of anything, despite the fact that there is actual real underlying technology. Now that infrastructure is going to stabilize over time. Even if we have a bubble that pops completely or just lets out some of the air slowly, it is going to stabilize at some point. And, Jim, I think you're the one who was mentioning that even Sam Altman was saying, people, we got to chill a little tiny bit. Now, part of that has to do with what happened with the GPT-5 launch, but GPT-5 is a real step forward, okay? But if you compare GPT-5 against GPT-4, and I'm not talking 4.0 and 0.3 and 0.1 and all the things that came in between, there is a huge leap forward there.
Yeah.
Okay. But we have seen so many incremental changes lately. And of course, now we're not just comparing OpenAI against OpenAI's previous product. We're comparing OpenAI against Anthropic and Claude and Gemini 2.5 and Grok 4 and whatever the hell it is that Meta is doing out there. We're comparing against all of these things. So the changes are starting to feel incremental, despite the fact that they're still very, very real. But we've built this hype machine that is built on the idea that the minute I add another number to it, and maybe this does sound a little bit like the .com era, if I add another number to it, if I change it from 4.5 to 5, now we have flying cars and spaceships that can travel to Venus.
Well, let's go there, but I want to wrap up this technology argument, the MIT report, because the second thing that happened was, in terms of this, was we never learn. And we've been through this before. Technology, new waves of technology are always adopted according to what's called the hype curve. And I forget her name, Julie, I wish I remembered her name, from Gartner, who invented this in the 1980s. And it says, and if you just picture a sine wave in your mind, if you're listening to this, and that is the first part of that, you go up way up on that top, you get to the top of that hill, and that's the unrealistic expectations everybody has about a new technology, not the ultimate technology, but the new technology. And they rush to implement it. And then they go, oh my God, this isn't happening. And you go into what they call the valley of despair. And then after that, every new technology, like the .com technology, you can get blades from the internet. Seems like a really good idea.
Love.com.
Yeah, love.com, everything.com, but you've got all these things, and suddenly people go, what? And you're in the valley of despair. Everybody goes, this is terrible. The people who are still working at it, at their desk, working at this, push this together, and all of a sudden, 2 years later, you start to see some real progress, and everything is
the slope of enlightenment. Jackie Fenn is the person you.
Thank you. Jackie's going to kill me. I know her.
This mystical day that I'm actually going to agree with Marcel.
We really do need to wrap this up.
No kiddings. But I mean, this whole .com or the bubble, I don't think the bubble's going to burst. I do agree that I think that some of the air is going to come out of it. So Jim, as you were saying, you're going to get this big plateau, but I think it's going to level off, right? People are going to go, oh my God, look at all these things we can do. And then it's going to slow down. And then there will probably be another wave where it goes up again with new features and functionality, enhanced video creation, those kinds of things like Marcel's been sharing with us. I don't see this disappearing. I don't see it failing. I think people are going to figure out how it best fits into their business or into their daily life, and they're going to start using it that way. Right now, everybody's trying all kinds of things with AI just to see how it works. How am I doing, Marcel?
I agree with you on this, John. I'm not going to let you have three for three.
Oh, come on.
The bubble is going to burst. The bubble is going to burst, but it's a tech stock bubble. It's not, and this is, and I think people should be legitimately worried about this. When you see valuations that are this high, and you start to think about where is the revenue going to come, Sam Altman right now is the .com era on steroids, and he's trying to get himself out of it because he sees it coming. I know he sees it coming. Everybody sees it. Anybody who's been in business long enough sees this coming. He's going, we're not making any money yet, but I'm going to need you to invest trillions more. And that will come to an end.
Yeah.
Some point, we're going to hit an economic speed bump, and people are going to pull back on investment. And a lot of things that are out there right now are going to get unrolled. The tech stocks are going to dive because they've risen so high. Everybody will panic. And the problem we have economically, but when this isn't an economic show, is that the stock market is being driven by tech stocks.
Right.
Like right now, the stock market is at all-time highs, but it's not because of the average companies that are in there. They're going up slowly. GDP growth is going up slowly, but the tech stocks are just driving the market. The market is being driven by like 20 stocks, and they're all tech, and they're all crazy valuations. If you're retiring, I would not be investing all my money in a tech company right now. You might want to sit down with somebody who's really good at this and ask what happens if the bubble bursts in the next 8 months and you lose a lot of your money. And the reason I say this is because there's a real personal piece to this. And I think people who sit outside the tech industry don't realize this. I did not make a lot of money through the dot-com bubble. I didn't bet my retirement on it. I'm so glad I didn't. I made some money on a few stocks that I heard about and things like that. But I sat with people coming back to me for jobs out of Silicon Valley at the time, or California at the time, and looking for jobs to replace the retirement income they lost. If they were 22, it wasn't a big deal. You lost your RSP, big deal. I talked to people who were in their 40s and 50s who were now having marital troubles, who had lost everything because they bet it all on tech stocks. That's the crime, and that's the thing that we have to watch out for. That's the reality. But will it come back? Yes. If you've got enough time to wait, this whole AI thing, if people haven't figured out that this whole AI thing is going to drive value at one point, and it's going to be the engine of the economy at one point, then I can't help you.
Okay, so I'm going to throw a little caution into that last statement, Jim. I still honestly, genuinely believe that the technology is transformational. I think that, if we talked about Sam Altman, you've often referred to him as, the hype master or something, or words to that effect. At first it was AI will reshape civilization. We need to move fast. We need to be China. And now, of course, he's talking about we're going to need new institutions. Society needs time to adapt. We don't fully understand what we're building. We're being really, really cautious about how we present these things. And the issue, of course, is that he understands that when people panic, people run. But the fact is, over time, I can't imagine but think that the real currency is going to be less about money and more about power, and who has the power and who has the control and so forth. I think that the real power behind AI to reshape society is that it will also reshape economics, and it will reshape what we think of as capitalism and things like this. We are going to move at some point into a post-scarcity world, assuming, of course, that, the ever popular caveat, we don't blow ourselves up before. Once we've got machines that can do everything, and the machines are moving to a point, maybe not like, next Tuesday or anything like this, but they're moving in that direction. It's like we watched, the Figure 2 robot last week folding towels. And, we're talking like really soft things that, you're manipulating and so forth. This doesn't seem like a major step, except it is a major step. We're starting to move these things into an environment when they're everywhere. And if we have machines that are building machines that are doing everything for us, we are moving into a post-scarcity world. We're moving into a place where humans need not apply. They're not necessary to do all these menial, manual things, which means that the economy as we understand it will not exist in the future. And I want to put, quotes around that. As we understand it today is not going to exist in the future. And I think we have to think about that. At the moment, if anything, if there is an AI bubble that bursts, in the classic sense, in the way that we think about it, that there's a major market correction as a result of it, all that's going to do is put the brakes on things a little bit. But the fact of the matter is that societal, economic, transformational future that I'm talking about is still coming. As far as I'm concerned, it's inevitable.
Transformation is inevitable. The distribution of income is not. This is the piece that we have ahead of us. We may figure out how to distribute income well, and I think the real difference in our positions is you believe that society will go to a post-scarcity environment where everybody will have everything. My position is, unless things radically change, particularly in the United States, billionaires will take most of the wealth and we will have a society that is more dystopian. Right now, history's on my side.
I do fear that.
I actually think that things are going to get worse before they get better. And like I am an eternal optimist, as in I do see the long-term view. I look at the future and I say, we've been through shit before. We're going through shit now. We're going to make it out the other side and things are going to be better. I'm a huge fan of history podcasts. And if you take a look at history and empires rising and falling and all this other sort of stuff, along the way, a lot of people get hurt, but the arc of progress has always been up, as in, we are in a much, much better world today, partly because people were run over along the way, into the future that we're in now. I'm not saying that it's good for those things to happen. I'm saying these things invariably happen and invariably we come out the other side. Unfortunately, I do feel like we're going to enter this, this mid-level dystopia for a little while before we come out, another side. And I'm hoping that it's not going to be, long-lived. But yes, I think we're getting into, I just have to look south of the border. I know we try not to make this a politics show, but I just have to look south of the border to see what it looks like when a superpower is starting to collapse. And I'm just hoping that it's a soft collapse. We're going to see something better being rebuilt not too long from now.
The other thing, though, that concerns me from a country standpoint is there was something I was looking at the other day that shows sort of the top countries in AI. U.S. is light years ahead of anybody. China is second and Japan is third. And the concern that I have is, what is Canada doing?
I think it's a huge concern because and in terms of the salvation of this, and it's hard not to get political, but I'm not talking politics. I'm talking about, there's a book written called Northern Democracies. I can't remember who wrote it. And Sinclair Stevens, the former conservative cabinet minister, gave me the copy of this book and was big on this and said, Northern democracies are different. You can call them socialist or whatever, but they do tend to have a more collective view. And Canada, being one of those, is a perfect place to talk about things like guaranteed annual income, like distribution of wealth. The problem with Canada is we're not building up the wealth.
Right.
And the wealth being the IT capability or the AI capability. I'm hoping our current prime minister understands that. I think he's smart enough to, and I'm hoping that's true. Because right now, we're not doing the work in AI to develop this. So if we get to a future where all of our factories are run by AI, right? And that's an easy future to picture. Where are you going to get the AI from?
Right.
You're going to buy it from one of 4 American companies.
Right.
And so you're going to buy that from there. Where are you going to get the money to buy it? Because they're going to be in a dysfunctional, and they're already there, they're going to be much more protectionist. So they might not want to buy your goods. We could end up in a place where we're renting the ability to drive our economy from someone else. One of the shows I'm going to do next week is on digital sovereignty. What happens when those companies say, we want more from you? You've taken this AI and it's now running your companies, your government, all that stuff. We want more money from you. And what are you going to do?
It's the new age ransomware.
Yeah. Yeah. So without our developing our own capability, we see this now economically with Canada. So a big country says, we're going to put tariffs on you. If you don't have the capabilities to survive on your own, you're going to be in big trouble. If you're dependent on, like I said, I don't want to make this political, but we've learned this is a functional lesson, not political. We've learned that if we're dependent on the U.S. and they do something else that's detrimental to you, you've got 2 things you can say, yes and sir. And, so you've got to be on your own. We're not there with AI.
No, and it's concerning that, under the Trudeau government, they were working on Bill C-26 for cybersecurity and Bill C-27 for AI and other things, obviously. Both of those died when they absolved the parliament or the government. They've now, it was encouraging to see that. They didn't
absolve it. They dissolved.
You said absolved as opposed to dissolved. I love that.
I want to make sure. Yes. We're not absolving that. We'll go back to, no.
Yeah. But it was encouraging to see that there is now a minister, and I can't remember his exact title, but he's a minister that's responsible for AI. Evan Solomon, I think it is.
Yep.
That's right.
Which it's encouraging But all I've heard, I don't know about you guys, but all I've heard is crickets.
First of all, Parliament is not in session at the moment. I just want to point that out.
I understand that.
So the fact that as much as, oh my God, we're risking slipping into politics here. But as much as we are seeing things happening at the moment, and we are, like, in terms of interprovincial trade barriers, in terms of, infrastructure, in terms of all sorts of things, the fact that so much is happening during the summer recess, to me, says that a lot more than nothing is happening at the moment. The fact that we're not seeing something from one particular department or another, especially one that is, and I hate to put it like this, but poorly defined. Okay. It shouldn't surprise us. There are, as we've talked about open source models a lot, in the past, here, there, and everywhere. And at the moment, a few days ago, I loaded up on, I've got a second PC here, and we even talked about this little PC that I put together a while ago there. It's not the most, brutal thing in the entire world, but it's like a, $750 PC. So it's not massive by any stretch of the imagination. But I loaded up the 20 billion parameter model of GPT-OSS on it a few days ago. And there is now an MCP connector that you can plug into this thing. And I haven't done it yet, but I plan on doing it sometime in the next few days to allow it to search the internet in the same way that these other things are happening. I think that part of what we want in the end is not so much a national response. I think the national response needs to be a driver to convince companies, institutions, and so forth to adopt these things in Canada. But from an individual perspective, the average person can have something like, for instance, there's a product called Home Assistant, which is an open source product that allows you to connect all of your things, whether it's things like smart lights, your smart speakers, garage doors that tell you whether they're open or closed. I have all of these things. Home Assistant can be a little open source box that you've got in your house that is not controlled by anybody on the outside. You're not paying a subscription fee to anybody. You're not doing anything like that. Add to that one of the modern models on a more modern PC. Add to that an open source AI model that can drive all of this infrastructure in your home. And suddenly the democratization of AI power has come home. You're not reliant on a $20 a month subscription or $200 a month subscription or whatever, because the vast majority of what any average person will need going forward, unless they want to do cool video things, unless they want to do 3D worlds, as in the case of Genie. I know for the last 2 episodes, I've tried to bring Genie 3 into this, and I'm just Genie 3. Unless we're doing these sorts of things that require massive infrastructure, what most people are going to want or need will be available as a home appliance. This is what the Linux and open source community had been doing for years. The idea that you could bring this massive technology, these bleeding edge technologies, and you can rig it into your home. Well, we're creating toys now that are little standalone boxes that don't require a lot of intelligence to run. And I think we're getting there. And I think the influx of open source tools, and if I can say one good thing about China, is the fact that they keep dropping these open source tools out there is forcing other companies like OpenAI to do the same thing. And the people who are going to benefit from this isn't your large mega corporation or your large government institution or whatever, but people, normal people at home who just want something that runs and works and makes their lives simpler. And I'll get off my soapbox for a moment.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And this is going to be a question. And whether we've been through the open source revolution, whether we all hope it happens, but if it does, it's going to be quiet and in the background, the way Linux was.
Exactly, which is exactly how it happened. Yep.
So you won't see it happening. If you're watching for a great reveal on this, you may find that there's just a lot of open source AI out there, because it's hard to avoid, because, Altman had to release he said he had to release an OpenAI open source version, because if not, everything was going to be Chinese. Yep. And he's right, because you can make all of the stories you want about how the Chinese have built something into this AI and you don't want to download it and all that sort of stuff because it'll ping back to China. That stuff is technical. It can be beaten, if it is even there. An open source version is going to come out of China. And why did they release it? They did it for a real reason. They wanted to throw a monkey wrench into the American dominance. They were not going to get into a point where they were dependent on American technology again.
Going to win this one either without doing something dramatic like this.
So we have the open source piece in there. But again, it's a question. There's a whole question. I think we should do a whole program on open source and if open source can survive, because there's all kinds of elements in that as well. But let's just say that open source is going to be with us for a while. And open source AI is going to be part of this somewhere in there. Now, the question comes into how we start to develop this is, can we develop this, and will we, as in, if we talk about, go back to our economic sovereignty, because there's a reason why Google is now pushing its smart speakers finally, right? And home automation. And Alexa is as well, and others are as well. And don't you two start talking, or not you two, but those two,
his digital friends.
We knew what you meant.
Yeah. The audience might not though. So so we've got these tools and people are going to start rolling them out. That's the new .com post-bubble bursting era where people start to build all of these things in. Digital e-commerce and all those things got built into the internet. Things that we use constantly are now built into the internet. And those are massive services that are really making a lot of money. Yep. So the question is, will Google and Amazon dominate? That's your economic question. Will they be able to make this as a service in Canada? There are some things happening in Canada. Both of our major telcos realize they're late to the party, perhaps, or maybe they're not, but they can't be left out. So both of our major telcos, and Roger's going to kill me for saying this, maybe they've got something going on, but Bell and TELUS have both announced that they're going to be building sovereign AI products. They need to keep serving this market. They cannot turn it over to mega or American companies, or they will cease to exist. Cohere, one of the big, Cohere, by the way, is advising the world, and we do have some.
But didn't Cohere just sell their operation to a U.S. company?
No, I think they're doing a thing with the Canadian government. I think they've done a lot of contracts with the U.S. The big worry I have is that Cohere will get sold to an American company. But right now, I think it's still in Canadian hands.
Just like everything else, just like all of the other Canadian technology advancements, they either move to the States or get bought by the States.
But that goes back to our sovereignty thing. But companies are going to be building services around this, and the question will be, who's going to make money in there? Is it going to be a competitive market? Is it that whole thing is something that's a whole program on its own, and I don't know where that's going to go.
I have to say that I've never been a huge fan of Chinese tech, and only because of the fact that the Chinese government basically says they own everything. But it put a big smile on my face when DeepSeek first came out, because this is around the time when the U.S. government was preventing NVIDIA chips from being sent to China and so on. And China said, screw you, I don't need you. And they built it without any of that. And
they built it on stolen chips.
Well,
but you're right. The training model, though, they whizzed the chips. They found them from somewhere. Gosh, these fell off a truck. These governments are smart. They got their own chips, but it does run on other technology.
Right. And the fact is that they came out with an open source AI, and it's forcing other businesses or other companies like the OpenAI and so forth to come out with their own open source.
Yeah. While GPT-5 was having its stumbles, the DeepSeek released a new model. Even their CEO is saying they are hindered by the lack of NVIDIA chips right now. But the Chinese government has said you will use at least 50% Chinese technology in your data centers. They've mandated it. And they've said, even if the NVIDIA chips start coming to China, the Chinese government's saying, no.
That's right.
They've the U.S.
You guys
government
figure this out. Get to work, Huawei. You make me one of these chips. And they can be quite intolerant of failure. You can actually make a lot of money in China. People think, there's no capitalism in China. BS. There are lots of rich people in China who can do very well.
One of the things that I want to point out there on the whole, the chips that are being used in the technology, part of what's happening with the democratization of artificial intelligence, particularly when it comes to things like open source models, is that the requirements to be able to use something that gets you somewhere are shrinking dramatically. So if you're trying to run a major data center where you're providing a bleeding edge model and you require, you have to be able to serve thousands or even hundreds of thousands or even millions of people simultaneously, that's a huge difference between I have a highly competent smaller model. And smaller in this case, by the way, could be something like the DeepSeek model, like the one that was released over on Hugging Face. I just checked right now. And by the way, the 3.1 model is still not available on their public chat interface. So the model has been dropped into Hugging Face, but there's no way to connect to it remotely. So I just checked, including through an API. So it's not available at the moment. The fact that you can run smaller models within an organization, like John, for instance, is your company actually setting up internal servers and I'm not talking about a massive data center here. I'm talking about a relatively competent standalone box for a couple $1,000s or whatever that is running an inference of one of these large open source models, even for testing or
No, not yet.
You should be doing that, because that is the sort of thing where you break the stranglehold with, and let's be honest here, I'm kind of a fan of what OpenAI and Google are doing. And maybe I'm even more of a fan of what Google is doing these days. But
I'm surprised, Jim, or Marcel.
I do appreciate.
I think you were a fan of Google. We haven't heard that before.
So anyway, I guess what I'm saying is, despite all that, despite the fact that I appreciate all of the work that these companies have done and the fact that I appreciate their products, I still think that we have been given a gift here. Not because they wanted to give us a gift, but because the race that's been going on, including the hype bubble around all this stuff, has given us all these really cool open source tools, which are giving us, and by us, I mean everyone, including companies, an opportunity to experiment with and develop solutions based on in-house open source models that then breaks the stranglehold with OpenAI or with Google.
Yep.
I think we need to take advantage of the fact that that stuff is out there. And I'm not, I'm a business in the sense that I'm a freelancer, but that's it. Okay. But a company like yours, John, should be just put aside a few $1,000s, build that in-house infrastructure and start experimenting.
Well, and it has to do with a couple of other things that have to happen as well. Can AI succeed in the enterprise? There's a couple of things that have to get solved. One of them is security. And it's huge.
Yes.
And, I want to bring that back to why there's going to be a reluctance to implement. People need to be experimenting because, Grok released 370,000, I think, conversations are now searchable by Google. And people can find out all kinds of things, all of the conversations people have had with Grok. And people do some weird stuff with Grok. They find out how to make new viruses, atom bombs. They treat it like a therapist. It was my favorite of all of these, and I'm not proposing we do this, but my favorite of one of the conversations is there's now a conversation that's searchable that tells you how to assassinate Elon Musk. But all of this is out there now, and I don't want anybody to do anything violent towards Elon Musk, but talk about comeuppance, because when the same thing happened to OpenAI, on a whole ton of conversations with the AI model that people didn't expect to be released, then searchable. What happened? Elon Musk took a victory lap and said, well, at least Grok doesn't have that problem.
Yeah.
Well, we're all going to have T-shirts made. It does now. So, but the fact is, these guys are playing too fast and loose with security. This is inexcusable. I'm sorry. The OpenAI one, and by the way, not just in case everybody thinks, I want to make sure that what I'm accurate about this. It's not that every conversation you had with OpenAI is Google searchable. There were some things that they implemented. They implemented one type of thing where you could share conversations. Good idea. Somebody down there says, shared conversations. Okay, let's implement that. And shared conversations did. They posted a link to the internet so you could share the conversation. People I want to bring out your little robot. Warning, danger, Will Robinson. Something should have
posted those share links to places like Reddit, for instance. Obviously, It's going to get scooped up by a search engine.
So, no, but I'm saying smart, if you had any sort of security process at all, John, you run this in your company.
Yep.
Somebody would have said, is this a good idea? I have to get approval before I can expose stuff to the internet. Just run
this
fast
is
and
one
break
of the, I love AI. Although on most of these shows, I'm the guy that's saying, we got to tighten the reins. I love AI. However, when it comes to security, we've talked before about built-in versus bolt-on. When it comes to AI, it feels like security is chasing it from behind, trying to catch up, and nobody's throwing it a lifeline. That's the concern I have, is that there's so much you can do with AI, but if you don't take security into account, it may not bite you today, but it will bite you one day.
But that's why Marcel's idea is brilliant. And I think you should take this back to your CEO and tell him that Marcel's idea is brilliant. Sorry. I know. I've created a monster, But the idea is put a little server. You can download. It's not a big deal. Put a little server in your IT department. Download. If you don't like the Chinese thing, that you can't do that. Download OpenAI's, thing, and let people play with it for an hour a day. Put on it only information that you want to be broadcast, that if it went out, it would be a marvelous thing. That's you can only put information on this that if it was on the front page of the Globe and Mail, nobody would care.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
I'm sure that is only on your internal network. That server does not have access to the internet.
Then, next layer, put it on your internal network. Now, you can start to play with this thing, make all your mistakes, try it out, do all kinds of crazy things on it. So you'll start to figure out, hey, somebody hacked that machine last night, John. Well, it's okay. Even though it's test, we backed it up. If somebody hacked that machine, don't worry. We've taken care of it. Can't move horizontally off that machine. So somebody actually got in past our firewall and hacked that. Let's take a look at that. Let's figure out how we're going to prevent that in the future. That's the types of things you can do if you're playing with this stuff, and you'll start to think about it. Because these are not, and I want to point this out. When I say we're not paying attention to AI security, it's not that we're not doing technical things. People are going to make technical mistakes. They're going to continue to make technical mistakes. There's a whole industry of 0 days. You're not going to eliminate that. But stupid, boneheaded mistakes of saying, well, we've got all this stuff, we should connect this to the internet. But what could possibly go wrong? And I don't know what happened at Grok, but I'm betting it's an equally stupid, boneheaded thing that somebody
I'm
did.
going to suggest possibly that Elon decided to go and fiddle with the knobs again. Because, that just seems to be always what's happening. Because Grok, look, to be there, I feel like I'm some kind of weird-ass evil person whenever I say this, but to be fair to XAI, the fact is Grok is a capable model. It is actually good software. And the fact is, when it was first released, before Elon decided he wanted to de-woke, Grok, it was a reliable, believable, usable model. And then all of a sudden at some point, it's like, well, I don't like its answers. Yeah, but its answers are the truth. Yeah, well, you know what? It's not the truth I wanted it to provide.
I'm going to jump in on the Elon factor here, okay? Elon is going to do for Grok what he did for Tesla. He had a fantastic lead in electric cars. He had a cachet with people. He was this genius. He was going to bring satellite internet to the world and all that sort of stuff. What does he do? He goes nuts. He starts attacking the people who are his core audience, calling us woke, dumping on us, doing all kinds of crazy things that alienate people. He's doing the same frickin' thing for Grok, because Grok and you can. Marcel's here is going to love this one, John. So you're going to hate me on this, but Grok is frickin' fantastic. It's fast. It's creative. It is marginally accurate in the areas that Elon hasn't. I said margin. It's very accurate in the areas that Elon hasn't messed with. The reason why I will not use Grok is I don't trust it, and I don't want that that. I don't
I
want
agree.
what's driving it to be part of my world. And so grok you, Elon, like that's the problem. And that's the Elon problem. They've either got to do a personality transplant on this guy or figure out how you get Jekyll and Hyde separated, or
I'm not sure,
companies are
I'm
gonna
not sure
fall.
that that's even possible though, because
I don't think it is
he
either.
owns the show, right?
Yeah.
So how do you get around the idea that this guy, like, he can't even be thrown out? Before ChatGPT came out, okay, the whole security bolted on, built in, blah, blah, blah. Before ChatGPT came out, AI researchers around the world, and, and I'm mostly an accelerate kind of guy, the Doctor Who reference there, accelerate. Anyway, the fact is, at that time, okay, everybody was basically saying, we are building something amazing. They were already seeing the beginnings of what AI would become. And in fact, this was, remember GPT-2, the model that was too dangerous to release to the public. We can't possibly do that. It's just, remember that? So, and back then they were talking about the idea that when you're building something like this, it should be built in a sandbox that is completely separate from external networks so that you can query it, so that you can work with it. And there are countless science fiction stories where they do exactly that. And of course, there it's always, how does the AI eventually get out? Well, do you know how the AI got out this time around? One day, Sam Altman and his friends, for whatever reason, and from what I understand, mostly Sam Altman, decided, let's just turn it on and make it available to the entire world with a chat interface. And in fact, they were so lackadaisical about the whole thing that they all left for the weekend. As in, so they turned on ChatGPT to the world and then left for the weekend because, well, nothing is going to happen.
What could possibly happen?
What could go wrong?
They thought about this.
And we were eternally grateful that on that screen that they came in on Monday morning did not say, would you like to play thermonuclear war?
The only way to win is not to play.
So just wrapping this up and going forward, because there's one more piece that came out this week, and our dear Sabine Hofstetter actually did two papers came out this week, and it sort of goes back to the GPT-5 thing. And this is where we might get to this level of ennui at this point for a short period of time. And that is the current AI scalable? And will we get to a more advanced level of AI by just simply scaling it, making it bigger? And that's going to be the big argument that comes up is, do we have to recast AI in a new model for it to actually get smarter? Can we reach a limit? And the practical limit may very well be, because right now, largely, it seems like most of what we're doing is just making it bigger. There are some innovations, there are some things that have been added, but for the most part, we're depending on making it bigger to scale it. And so one of the things that could have happened to GPT-5 is they just may have reached their limits where they can't get enough scalability. And that may be one of the things that slowed the model down.
What slowed them down is hardware, the limitations of hardware, the limitations of chips, the limitations of compute, the limitations of power. I don't believe for a moment that scaling is at an end by any stretch of the imagination. And you have to remember, when you're getting close to superhuman power, well, we already are at superhuman powers, but once you get past a certain point, like we're already at the point where it's 95% better, let's say, than anyone anywhere in the world at most of these topics. So when you go from 95% to 96%, you and I and almost everybody in the world doesn't notice that. And as a result, that's part, to me anyway, that's part of the ennui that you're talking about. You remember when Sora came out and the 12 days of shipments, remember that? Like a gazillion years ago, which is actually only months ago now. Anyway, when we were talking about that at the time, there was one thing in particular that was released, and I don't remember if it was 03 or something like that. And we were all kind of like, well, and John used the expression, lunchbox let down or lunch bag let down, whatever the expression is.
Lunchbox.
And yeah, part of the issue is I have struggled with this with GPT-5. Like I've been using GPT-5. I think it is a spectacular model. It's actually great at lots of things, especially when you understand the whole model picker thing and how that works. And of course, if you've got a Plus subscription, you can go into a strictly thinking mode if that's what you want. But I struggle to come up with things that I can test that will deliver for me a result that actually tells me, wow, we've come further. The only next step is magic. Unfortunately, we don't have magic yet, but we're awfully close to it. And it's not out of our reach. Sorry.
Sabine came up with this idea, and I think it was from a paper that was published this week. And so we may be actually in closer to agreement than we normally are. You don't see the progress because the progress isn't on the flashy stuff. She was just reporting on what this paper that had been published said, which was that accuracy requires incredible amounts of compute. And so for them to have made GPT-5 more accurate is going to absorb a lot of computing resources. And therefore, it is not going to show off a lot, but it's going to stress their computing ability. And that, I think, is a huge piece of this, is that many of the things that happen that are done well, that are taking an incredible amount of compute, are just things that we accept or we don't see. So for instance, GPT-5 is potentially much more accurate in its answers. I tell you, from working with it all this week, I haven't seen a hallucination, and I try to stretch it. I try to see what happens, and I work with it a lot. Second thing, what drives me crazy, and we really do, next week you should lead the show, Marcel, and we should just do cool tools. Let me get out of the driver's seat because I tend to push things to these discussions.
Cool tools.
We should just do tools. Because one of the things that everybody needs graphics, and it's a cool thing to have. It's, now if you're doing a PowerPoint slide, you want to get a graphic, or you want to send even a joke to somebody, and people do that too. So we like graphics, and we always have, and producing those. But the damn thing could never spell a word correctly. And so every time there was a word in a graphic, or when was the last time you saw somebody with 6 fingers? When, so
exactly.
A lot of,
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of the compute, according to Sabine Hofstetter, and you're not going to argue with Sabine. If you do, I'm going to tell her.
Actually, I do argue with her every once in a while.
Okay.
And I have a couple of issues with that particular video, by the way.
Really? Oh, good. Jump in.
Okay. One of the issues that I have is, and I didn't think she stressed this enough, is the limits of what we're talking. She talked about, to get close to 100% accuracy, we're going to need a system that basically takes up the entire solar system or something like that. I think that that's kind of a crazy suggestion right off the bat. 100% accuracy, we've never asked for 100% accuracy out of anything in our world, especially not people. We'd like to think we could get 100% accuracy, but even when we're talking about actual honest to God facts, truth, facts, people argue about that. And then we get into discussions of what is truth exactly? And, and then alternative facts and so forth. But the fact of the matter is, this idea that we are ever going to settle on something that is 100% factual, even if the AI could deliver it to us, we wouldn't want it. Because we want 100% facts when we're trying to send a spacecraft from Earth and we want it to meet up with an asteroid 2.5 years later, land on the surface, pick up some samples, get back off, come back, land within a few square meters on Earth 4.5 years later. We want that kind of accuracy, but that's not for everything that we're dealing with. The idea that we are going to demand that of LLMs is actually kind of insane. LLMs are an intelligence. I've tried to get people to use the term synthetic intelligence as opposed to artificial intelligence, because artificial implies that it's not real. No, it's a real intelligence, but our real intelligence doesn't stop at what we think of up here. Our real intelligence involves picking up tools, using things to make it easier to look at things and so forth. We are tool-using animals, and we scaffold our intelligence with all these tools. And I think that this is the part where, it's like, well, we asked the language model to do like this one thing. But if you fire up an agent session and it scours the internet and opens up web pages and wanders around and does stuff like this, that's magic. And that's not the LLM specifically doing everything. That's the LLM understanding that there are tools that will deliver those 100% accurate results, or will deliver the truth, whatever the hell that means, outside of the LLM itself. We don't need 100% accuracy from the model.
But two pieces you said. One is 100% accuracy, and I am gonna tell Sabine on you. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna rat you out to her because she's German.
Go ahead. Is she listening?
She's a physicist. I'm sure she listens to the program. We listen to her program. But I think that 100% accuracy is never going to happen. We get that. Even a physicist will tell you that. But there is a level of tolerance, like everything else. And so if you're going to bring a spacecraft back into Earth, maybe it can lose a tile. It shouldn't lose 7 astronauts. I mean,
that's right. But we're not going to use a large language model to fly the spaceship to an asteroid. We're going to use a set of dedicated tools that are not encumbered by, I wonder what the weather is like on Venus today, despite the fact that I'm heading to Bennu,
Exactly. So those things for which we need huge amounts of accuracy, we use compute, we use algorithms, not a problem. For those things that we need the semblance or the pretense of creativity, we use AI. Because there's the debate about whether AI will actually become intelligent. We can get into debates about chaos theory and emergent behavior. Whether emergent behavior can happen within the current models or not. The theory is if we make it big enough, it will happen. Well, no, but it can happen. But it's the degree to which it happens that we class as intelligence. Can that happen within this? And the theory is if I keep making the processing bigger, eventually I'm going to see something that we could class as superintelligence. And the others are saying, no, it's a mechanical Turk. It's always going to appear to be intelligent.
And they're wrong.
It fools you into that. And that's all we're ever going to get from this model. We'll have to go to a different way of doing this.
Right.
Either one.
And how do I know that you guys are real? I mean, I'm not in the same room with you. I see you on the screen. For all I know, you're an AI-generated Jim Love, and you're an AI-generated John Pinard. Who the hell?
I would have made me better looking. Sorry.
But at the end of the day, when you look at the grand scheme of things, AI is just another tool that you have in your toolbox. You're not necessarily going to use it for everything. You're going to use it for things where it makes the most sense. There may be other tools that you're going to use, like Marcel said, as far as flying the shuttle. It makes more sense to use something else. And I think people need to understand that. It's not the be-all and end-all. It will help you to get where you need to go, but you may still need other tools to do that as well.
Well, you said it in last week's program, and you said AI has to be reliable to be adopted in the enterprise.
Yes.
And right now, my point is they're spending a lot of time and money on making it more reliable, making it more bulletproof, because they figured out, that if we don't do that, we're not going to get the corporate level of adoption that we need.
Exactly.
Developing models to use tools as opposed to just relying entirely on scaling the model to be more accurate.
Absolutely.
You can give the final 2 words if you'd like.
If you say Arthur C. Clarke, there's nowhere that we stop the show.
Okay, well, I'm going to give sort of the semi-final word to Arthur C. Clarke in the sense that there's a corollary as far as I'm concerned to that statement. And Clarke is credited with saying any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I've been fond of saying for years that if it's distinguishable from magic, it's not sufficiently advanced. So obviously, it's not yet sufficiently advanced.
That's our show. If you think I'm going to argue with Arthur C. Clarke, I have another thing coming. There's only one thing to say to that. Live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper. Peace and long life.
And that's our show for this week. If you've come this far, you truly are a fan of the show or very interested in AI. So just a note to say we'll have another episode tomorrow and an interview with the head of Zoho Canada, and I think another equally thoughtful discussion of AI and how Zoho is trying to bring AI not just to large, but also small and medium-sized businesses in Canada and around the world. It's worth listening to. And if you've had enough for one weekend, I could understand that. Get out, enjoy the sun. Hopefully I'll talk to you again on Monday morning when I come back with the tech news on #trending. I'm your host, Jim Love. Have a great weekend.